Dodge and burn is the best method for natural skin retouching results using Photoshop. In this video, we're gonna break down dodge and burn and learn how to brighten and darken specific areas to even out tonal transitions, and learn how to use global dodge and burn to give your images that three-dimensional pop. Let's go ahead and break it down and cover todo el pedo. I think I hit my mic. So before we get into how to make the dodge and burn layers, we're gonna take a look at where you should specifically be dodging and burning and analyze a few images. So this is the before, and then this is the after when we're selectively darkening and brightening specific areas using the brush tool. Let's look at another image where once I've set up my helper layers, this is what it's gonna look like when we do the dodge, brightening and evening out the tones here. So we got areas that are bright that we can then lighten up a little bit so that these tones kind of have a natural flow. So this is the after, and then using the global to give it that little three-dimensional pop. So let me take off that helper layer, and this is the before and then the after. Let's take a look at another image. And it's important to understand that each image is going to be different when you're setting up your helper layers. So let's take a look at this one. This is the before. So here you can see that there's some areas, and I'm going to mark it in red. So on this image, let's mark it in red where I would be brightening up, and then what's in blue is where I would be darkening. So here, if I zoom in, you're going to notice that right here, there's some inconsistencies here in the skin. We have a bright area, then it goes to dark, then it goes to bright. And I would be brightening up these areas here with the brush tool. And we're gonna get to that in a little bit. Same thing here, I would be brightening up this area, this area. This area right here, I would darken it so we can even it out. And let's come back to the bright. So whatever you see in red is areas that I would be brightening up. Now I'm not going to go through the whole thing because it's going to take forever, but I think you get the general idea of where I would be brightening and darkening specific areas. So I'm going to go ahead and take that off. And let's take a look at the after. So after seeing that, you should see that right here, this is the after. So before, I want you to look at the tonal areas that are off a little bit and noticing how with dodge and burn, I'm smoothing out. Okay, let's take a look at one more image. We're going to zoom in here. And the reason why we make it black and white is so that it's easier to see where these areas need improvement. This is the before, and then this is with the local dodge and burn. Look at the transition that we're going to see here. See how it's kind of all bunched up here? Different types of tones, and then smoothing it out on the after. So before and then after, and then with the global. So let me go ahead and take off the black and white so you guys can see that. I'm going to zoom out. And let's take a look at the before and then after. So now that we've seen a couple of images and seeing how dodge and burn can help with the skin retouching, I'm going to show you how to actually set up the layers. And I'm going to be giving away a free action so you don't have to worry about making this, but I am going to show you the process just so you know what's going on with the action. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this little folder here. And I'm going to go ahead and make the dodge and burn action myself. So here I'm going to go to the adjustment layer panel. Then I'm going to go to curves. And that's the method I use. There's also the 50% gray, which I use sometimes, but I mainly use the curves method. So I'm going to go to curves here. And what you're going to get is you're going to get an adjustment layer and then this white layer mask. I'm going to rename this to dodge. Now remember, dodge is to lighten up areas. So with this curve, I'm going to go here to the middle and I'm going to drag it straight up right about here. So right in the middle point between this little box and this box, so right about there looks fine. And obviously when I brighten it up and I raise it up, it does it to the entire image. So I'm going to press Ctrl-I so that we can invert the mask so that we can brush in where we want to brighten. So I'm going to click the layer mask. It's very important to click the layer mask and then press Ctrl-I to invert it. So now it's black, meaning it's not showing up. We're going to go ahead and make another one by going back to curves. We're going to now bring this down So we can set up the darken, and same thing, we're gonna put it like right in the middle point here. And we're gonna name this burn, because this is the areas that we're gonna darken. And we're gonna click the layer mask, press Control-I. And then we're now gonna set up the helper layers. We saw in the other examples a while ago that we want the black and white so that we can really see, and it can help assist us see where we need to be brightening and darkening up areas. So in order to do that, we're gonna go back to the adjustment layer. We're gonna go to solid color, and we're gonna go down here and type in 80, 80, 80. That basically is 50% gray. We're gonna hit OK, and we're gonna change the blend mode to color. We're gonna rename this to BW for black and white. And right now, if I just did black and white, yeah, I would still be able to see some of these tonal areas that need to be adjusted, but we need a little bit more assistance. So we're gonna add another curves. And this time, we're gonna come up here into this little properties dialog box, and we're gonna add like an S curve. And by doing this, this is gonna allow me to see these areas that I need to improve. So it's gonna be very important, and throughout this video, you're gonna see me adjusting this frequently so that I can see exactly where I need to be brushing in these areas. So I'm gonna double click on curves 1, and I'm gonna rename this to contrast. So that's basically what we're doing when we're adjusting that specific curves areas. We're adjusting the contrast so it helps us visually see where we need to be brushing in. And it's very important to understand that each image is gonna be different, whether you shoot natural light, studio, or strobe. This helper layer, this contrast, is gonna be adjusted differently for image to image. So for example, with Alexandra, it was adjusted differently, Fernanda, and then the one with Daphne. So keep that in mind, that your results are gonna look different depending on your image. So I'm gonna group all of these. So I'm gonna press Shift and then grab everything, Control G. I'm gonna rename this to local DB. I'm gonna open the folder up, and then I'm gonna group the helper layers. Let me drag this one in, there we go. And we're gonna name this helper layer. Boom, so there we go. So now we have it set up. We have our helper layer that we can turn off with the eyeball. We can also, with this adjustment layer, adjust the blend mode. Now this is super important. This is like a pro tip here. You can change it to overlay, multiply, and also darken, and those blend modes will give you a different effect. So I love to use overlay. I know my friend Marco loves to use multiply, and that one can be helpful, and it's gonna be different depending on the way your eyes see things. So in this specific photo, I think multiply looks the best. So play around with the blend modes, and that can be an extra assistance for you guys. So once I have that set up, and remember that I'm gonna give you an action, the action's gonna run and it'll have all of these little layers set up, is the first thing that you're gonna wanna do is you're gonna want to go to the contrast layer and basically adjust this contrast to see where these areas need improvement. And that's the first thing that you wanna do, is you wanna start identifying, okay, where do I need to start lightening up areas? Where do I need to start darkening up areas? Because we want this kind of nice, even transitions throughout the skin. So what I like to do is I like to start off with dodge. So I'm gonna click inside of the layer mask, which is black. I'm gonna get the brush tool, and we're gonna set up the brush setting. So what I like to use is 100% opacity, 1% flow, and I'm also gonna make sure that I have the enable the brush style, airbrush style, and then also the pen pressure. Now, I also use a Wacom tablet. Now this is super important, at least for my workflow. Some people prefer to use the mouse method, but I highly encourage you guys to get one of these and invest in one. It's gonna pay off. Now that I have opacity 100 and flow at 1%, and if you don't know what flow basically means, is let me put it like at 50% flow. Basically, it's gonna brush in 50% of this white here. Because remember, we set it to black. When I brush with white, it's gonna reveal that effect wherever I brush. So obviously, brushing at 50% is gonna bring back that curve that we set up earlier and bring up that brightness, and obviously that's way too much, that looks terrible. So that's why I like to set it up to 1%. so that I can kind of slowly build this up. So I'm gonna make sure I'm clicked on dodge, because remember the dodge is gonna brighten up areas. I'm gonna zoom in. And it's important that you start off zooming maybe around 100 to 300, because the more you zoom in at the very beginning, it's gonna cause problems. So right here, I can see that I have an area that I want to fix. So I'm just slowly brushing with a pretty decently large brush. And I'm kind of just getting a general base on where I want to start fixing these transitions. So I'm looking for the dark areas and trying to figure out if I can blend it and basically blend that exposure so it's all nice and even. And because I'm set at the 1% flow, I'm able to kind of build this up. And just with a couple of clicks, let's look at the before and after. So if I click this eyeball and dodge, this is the before and then the after. Let's take off the helper layer. So before and then the after. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and turn that back on. I'm gonna go ahead and zoom in just a little bit more now. And what I like to do is I like to focus on just one area. So right now, as I'm setting up my contrast, I'm setting it specifically for the forehead. And we're focusing on the dodge. So I'm gonna go back to my helper layer, my contrast, and remember that we're gonna be constantly adjusting this and dragging this so that we can figure out and make it easier for us as we're doing the dodge and burn process. So I'm looking for the darker areas with the dodge, and I'm just slowly brushing it in and evening out these areas. Now it's gonna take some time for you guys to get used to finding these areas and knowing if you're doing it too much. It's gonna take a lot of patience and it's gonna take a lot of practice. Okay, so far, I'm gonna take off the helper layer again. And let's take a look at the before and then the after. So before and after. Now I'm noticing that there's some bright areas here. So now I'm gonna focus on the burn. And I'm gonna try a different blend mode. So let's maybe go to darken. And let's see how darken works. Let me see if darken would look good with this. And it does. You see, now I really get to see these white areas that are a little bit too bright. And now I'm gonna go into burn and I'm gonna even out those areas. So now I'm darkening up the exposure so it kind of meets the same type of exposure. And that's why this tablet helps out. You can be a little bit more precise. And if you don't have a tablet, I apologize. If you're using a mouse, you can definitely still do a great job. I believe my friend Francisco Hernandez, FJH, I think he still uses a mouse. And he does a great job with dodge and burn. So you can still get great results using a mouse. And so once again, I'm just kind of darkening up these little areas. And I'm probably gonna be saying the same thing over and over again. So I'm sure at the end of this tutorial, you'll really kind of understand it. So let's take a look at the before here. So before and the after, before and then the after. Let me take this helper layer off. Let's go ahead and zoom out, Control minus. And let's look at what we've done so far just on the forehead. And you'll notice that the transitions are looking nice and smooth on the forehead. Now, next area I want to focus in on is this area here. So even without the helper layer, I can already tell that this right here is already too dark. And then this transition, it goes from like really light to this awkward like middle tone and then dark. So I want to fade that off a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my dodge. I'm going to go back to my contrast because when I set up the contrast, I was really focusing on the forehead and now I can't really see it now. So I'm going to kind of reset this. You can reset it by clicking this little arrow here, this kind of upside down arrow, and I'm going to reset it. And now I'm going to set it so that I can really see the inconsistencies in this specific area. So remember that you're always using the helper layer to help guide you in specific areas that you're working with. It's not, I leave it there set to that same area the whole time and I'm just dodging burning with that specific setting. So I'm adjusting it so that I can see this little area, and I think it looks pretty good now. So I'm gonna go to dodge, and instead of getting a small brush and kind of evening out, I'm gonna get a bigger brush. So it'll get a easier transition just like this. And because we're at that 1% flow, it should be doing a good job of evening out these areas. Now it's very, very, very important that as I'm doing this, I'm not removing the natural shadow completely that's supposed to be there. Okay, so like let me mark it here so I don't lose my, my place here. But let me show you an example of what not to do. So I'm gonna come here, we have a natural shadow here. I don't wanna come over here and completely get rid of it like this, because then it's not gonna look right. So if I take the helper layer on, and now I've completely got rid of that little area there, okay? And I brightened it up too much. So what I wanna do is I just wanna blend it. I'm gonna come back to it, and I'm still gonna blend it just a little bit more, making sure that I still preserve that shadow. Now there's some areas here that I know I'm gonna wanna burn because they're a little bit lighter, so I'm gonna go in here and I'm gonna add a little bit of burn here too as well. And if you guys look up makeup tutorials on contouring, it'll show you how to add three-dimensional shape to your photos using dodge and burn. So I'm gonna kind of darken up this area a little bit right there. So let's take a look at it now. So I'm gonna take off the helper. Let's take a look at the before and the after, smoothing out that transition. I think that looks good. Let's look at the burn. And let me zoom in because I know it's gonna be kind of hard to see probably on YouTube when the compression and stuff. So before, and then the after on the burn, and then the dodge before, and then the after. So let's look at the overall thing before and after. And I think that that's looking pretty good as far as the forehead, okay? Now let me take a look at it again. The contrast, I do have some areas over here that I'm noticing that I need to blend a little bit. So I'm gonna switch back to the dodge, and this is why some people take a long time with the dodge and burn process, is that you can get great results if you really take your time and look at everything and clean things up. Now, it's important to understand too that you do not need to go pixel by pixel and get everything and spend 2 hours. You can still get great results spending just 10 minutes, 5 minutes, just dodging and burning the main areas. So don't get a misconception of this that you have to spend an hour or two. It really depends on your workflow and what you're trying to achieve. So if you're wondering about me, I spend anywhere from like 20 minutes to 30 minutes. I know other people spend an hour to 2 hours, and that's totally fine. It's really dependent on the look you're trying to achieve. So on this one, I am going a little bit slower, so I apologize because I really want to explain to you guys, and I'll be fast forwarding some areas in a little bit. So you know what? I'll actually fast forward this little section here. So I'm going to finish off the forehead. I'm going to fast forward it. And then we're going to continue, and then we're going to jump into the cheek in a moment, okay? Now that I've finished the forehead, let's take a look at the before and after. So this is the before and after. So zooming out, I think it looks pretty good. I probably could take my time a little bit, but I think you guys get the overall idea. So now what I want to do is, now that I've cleaned up the forehead, I'm going to come now to the cheek and make some adjustments here. So I'm going to reset my contrast layer, clicking this little upside down arrow, and now we're going to adjust the tone curve so that we can see the areas that need to be adjusted. So right about here. Now this one's a little bit difficult to see because there's some areas here and there's some areas that I need to darken. So it's very important when you're doing the dodge and burn is to understand where the light was coming from. So I had my strobe light camera left. So naturally there should be some shadow on the right side of the face. So it's important that we keep the same physics of light going on. So I'm gonna probably be doing more burn on this side of the face because there should naturally be a shadow. So I'm gonna come over here and I'm gonna definitely darken up some areas over here. And I'm just getting my contrast so that I can see it the best I can. I think right about there looks good. So I have it on dark and I'm curious to see what overlay looks like. Overlay actually looks pretty good. So remember that you want to experiment with the different blend modes. And I'm going to go to burn and I'm going to come over here and you can see here we got the darks and then it gets light, light, light. So I'm going to make sure that we even this out with the burn. Because on this side of the face, it should be a little bit darker. There should be some shadow, I should say. So that's why I'm using the burn here. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and zoom out, Control minus. Now this little area, this transition I don't like, so I'm gonna actually dodge that a little bit. There we go. And then we'll jump in here. So there's some areas right here that are a little bit blotchy, so I'm gonna go with the burn and I'm gonna darken that so it's a little bit more even. And it's important to be zooming in and out and also to be adjusting the brush size constantly throughout this whole process. So you're not just keeping the brush the same size. So my left hand is on the keyboard, pushing the left and the right brackets so that I can adjust the brush size. So as I'm moving around, I can kind of reset it as I see any areas that need to be adjusted. Now there are some areas, as I look in here, there are some areas that are a little bit too dark, so I'm gonna go dodge and just match up the same type of tone that's in the surrounding area. So I'm not eliminating it, I'm just evening it out so that it matches the same area. Then there's some areas here that need to be darkened a little bit. And let me darken this area. Let me zoom out. Now you don't want to stay too zoomed in because if you zoom in too much, that was like a mistake that I used to make a lot, is zooming in too much and then you start to notice like, oh crap, I went a little bit too far there. So that's why I like to zoom in and out a lot. So let's kind of take a look at the before and after. So before and then the after. So it's looking pretty good on this side. I do want to darken up some more areas over here. It's a little bit difficult for me to see it. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna try a different blend mode. Let's see what multiply looks like. That doesn't look good. Darken. So let's go back to darken and I need to readjust this contrast so I can really help and it can really assist me because that's the purpose of it. I'll go about right about there. Let me make sure I zoom out. I think I've zoomed in too much. There we go. So now I'm gonna come back. And I don't want to spend too much time on the cheek because I think you guys get the general idea. So I'm going to start moving into some other areas. And then I can always fast forward coming back to this part. So I'm going to come back and get like the main areas because I think that's the point that I want you guys to see because a lot of people are always curious like, where do you dodge and burn? And what are the areas that I should be focused in on? So that's what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to go to the main areas. And as I'm moving around, start looking at the areas you think that I should be dodging and burning so that you can start training your eye. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, it is going to take some time for you to train your eye to see where you should be darkening and brightening up certain areas. So I'm dodging here just to even out some of these tones. This area looks pretty good, so I'm just going to kind of dodge it just a little bit, smooth out some of these little areas. Right about there. Let's come back over here. Same thing with the chin. And we'll get to the nose in a little bit. And what I'm going to do, because I know that this part's going to take me some time, is I'm going to go ahead and fast forward, and I'm really going to focus on this area here. Focus on adjusting this area just a little bit more, and then we'll kind of hone in on the nose area in a little bit. So I think we're going to go ahead and finish off on the nose. Overall, I like what I got. Now, could I take some more time? Of course I could. But overall, I like the overall look that I'm getting with my dodge and burn. We're going to focus on the nose, and I'm going to zoom in just a little bit more. And the nose isn't actually that bad, but I do want to just make sure that we can get it a little bit more even. So I'm going to go into my helper. I'm going to go to, I think multiply is going to look good on this one, and it does, absolutely. And I'm actually going to bring this down. There we go, create that contrast. Now, because the light was coming from camera left, I'm actually going to burn this instead of dodging. I'm going to spend a little bit more time burning this area and then maybe dodge this area just a little bit. So I'm going to go to, let's start off with the burn. And I'm going to come in here. So I hope you guys are understanding what the goal of the local dodge and burn is. Because in a moment, we're going to get into the global. And there we go, that looks pretty good. And we're going to go to dodge. Going to even some of these areas out. In some of these areas, you know, they don't have to be like super perfect because, I mean, if you're going to post on Instagram, some people might not even see like these little little areas, pixel by pixel. So there we go. So let's zoom out. Let's take the helper layer off. So before and then the after. I think it looks pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that considering this is like my second time editing it. So overall, looks good. Now keep in mind, when you do dodge and burn on the face, you should also be doing it on the other parts of the body. Now I'm not gonna do this in this tutorial because I don't wanna take, you know, super long, but keep that in mind. I would then go into the other parts of the body and then do the dodge and burn. You know what, I'm gonna go ahead and do it, but I'm gonna go ahead and fast forward it. As I'm going throughout the body, I'm kind of just going for the bigger areas of concern. I'm not gonna try to go pixel by pixel and make sure that it's perfect. I'm just trying to get the bigger areas so that I can smooth it out. The next thing that we're gonna do is we're gonna add some more curve adjustment layers, and we're gonna do global dodge and burn. So I'm gonna add some more layers of the adjustments. I'm gonna go here. I'm gonna go to exposure, curves, and we're gonna raise it up like we did earlier. Right about there, it's fine. We're gonna invert it, Control I. This will be, G, G dodge, and then I'll make another one, and we're gonna go and bring that down, and we're gonna name it G burn. There we go. So now the global, what the global is gonna help us do, this is what's really gonna add depth and really bring that 3D pop in the image. So on the global dodge, I'm gonna now change my brush settings to about 4 or 5. So I'm gonna put 4 in this example. And what I'm going to do is I'm gonna brush in naturally where the highlights already are. Now by going at 4% flow, I'm gonna add a little bit more exposure. So I have to be careful. So I'm gonna make this a little bit large. The forehead should have a little bit more light right here. So I'm gonna maybe do like 2 or 3 clicks right there. I'm gonna add a couple of clicks here because there should have been a little bit of light. I'm gonna add here on the lips. And I'm gonna go ahead and zoom in here. And this is gonna add a little bit more structure to the face once again and give it that depth that's gonna help make the image come to life. So I'm dodging this. Now I'm gonna come into the other one. And the only difference that I'm doing now is that I have them on separate layers. And what's cool about that is because I have them on separate layers, I can always adjust the opacity if I feel like if I went too far or delete it. And the main difference is that my flow has changed to 4%. So now I'm gonna see a more of a dramatic effect. So I'm gonna make sure these lips, I wanna make sure I'm on white so I wasn't seeing anything. I'm gonna make sure that these lips are getting dark. I'm gonna add a little bit of shadow underneath the lip so they can make it pop a little bit. And where else? I'm gonna add just a little bit inside of the eye here. So I'm gonna darken it up just a little bit right there. Underneath the eye as well. I'm gonna add a little bit just around, and we talked about contouring at the beginning of the video. And if you look up some contouring makeup tutorials, I'm gonna darken up areas here to really bring out the cheekbone over here. And I'm going with a bigger brush because I want this to be a nice, soft effect. And it's important that I'm darkening up areas, especially right underneath the chin. I'm darkening up areas that already naturally have those shadows, all right? So I'm gonna go there. And let's take a look at what I've done so far. So I'm gonna zoom out. Let's look at the burn. See how it's really making things pop a little bit. Let's go to the dodge now. And look at the lips. I think the lips are the ones that really shined here, okay? I'm gonna zoom out. I'm gonna add some shine to the hair. This time though, I'm gonna go about, let's go 9% flow. And I'm gonna make sure I'm on my dodge on the global. And I'm gonna brush the hair only where it's already bright. So I'm gonna go here, I'm adding that nice little shine. Gonna go there. Gonna brush here. Now I can be more precise, but I think you guys are getting the general idea here. Only going into the areas that have that natural highlight already. Very good. So let's take a look here. I'm gonna merge these into a folder. And let's take a look at the before and then the after. So this is the global now. Look at that, boom. I'm gonna go back into the global. I'm gonna go into the dodge now. And I'm gonna go ahead and zoom in to the eyes. Now I can be really precise. I can make a whole video dedicated to doing global with the eyes, but I'm just gonna do a fast version of it. So I'm gonna add a little bit more light into the little catch light there. And I'm gonna add light coming in from the opposite side of the eye. So I'm brushing in some exposure, brushing exposure there. I'm gonna brush some here, get some there. There we go. I'll go ahead and zoom out. I'm actually gonna darken up the eyebrows a little bit. So I'm gonna go back to the burn. And I'm just brushing in some darkness here at 9% flow so I get that really dramatic effect. And let's take a look at the overall before and after. So let me zoom in here. This is the before and then the after. Damn, looks pretty good. I'm happy with it. Keep in mind with this global adjustment, I'm gonna go back to the global now. I don't have to just use it on the body. I can incorporate this into my background as well. So I'm gonna go to the burn and I'm gonna darken up certain areas like right here so that she can pop. I'm gonna darken these up just even more. And over here, so since this is a close-up, I really don't have a lot of areas to work with, but I can, dodge and burn the clothes and other areas to really make things pop. So consider those elements, all right? Now I'm gonna show you a little trick here, is if I want like a 3-dimensional pop on the face, one of the things that I also like to do is I like to add a curves adjustment. And I like to bring up the curve just a little bit. So we know that it's going to brighten up the entire image. I'm going to change the blend mode actually to luminosity so I don't mess with the color. So I'm going to change it to luminosity. And as I bring this up, it's going to be brightening up the exposure. But it's brightening up the entire image. So obviously we don't want that. I'm going to double click the layer in the blank area. And what I should get is the layer styles. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell Photoshop, I don't want this in the dark areas. I only want it in the specific highlights that I want. So as I drag this underlying layer, this little triangle here, or arrow, whatever you want to call it, you're going to notice that it should, there we go, that it should be bringing in that exposure, and it's eliminating it from these tones here. And I want to be very precise. I only want it to be bright in these general areas here. But the problem is right now it's very sharp. So I'm going to hold Alt and grab half of this little triangle and then drag it so I can fade it just a little bit. So I like to add this into my photos so I get that three-dimensional pop. Now right now it's too much, so I'm going to go to the opacity and then bring this down. I want it to be very, 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 very subtle. Don't start acting cute and adding this and then the opacity is too much, starts to look fake. So don't act cute. I'm going to bring it down to like maybe 65. So let me click it, the before, after. I still think it's too cute here, so I'm actually going to bring it down. 45. Nope, I'm going to even bring it down even more. We're going to go about 35. Okay, each image is going to be different depending on the settings, but right there I think it looks pretty good. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and zoom out. Actually, no, I'm going to zoom in. I want to show you where exactly I was brushing. So let's take a look at the overall image. I want to say it's pretty much done. I'm happy with it. Once again, I can take my time. I could do more if I wanted to, but you guys get the general idea. So let me start off. Let me take off this one. Let's start off with the dodge. So let's see. I'm going to hold Alt on the layer mask, and I'm going to click here. And this is where I had lightened up areas. So by clicking Alt, it'll show you where exactly I was brushing in. Let's take a look at the burn. So this is all the areas that I burned. Let me go into the global now. These are the areas that I brightened. These are the areas that I darkened. And then we had our little 3D extra little pop with the curves there. So let's take a look at the overall before and after. I'm going to group everything. So this is the before and then the after. Okay. Now, if you guys stayed and saw this whole video, my loyal fans that are watching right now, because I know it's a long video, but if you're watching right now, put a comment below. And if you want my actions, the first 5 people that comment that saw up until this point, I'm going to give you them for free. I'm going to email them to you. So if you're watching right now, send me an email, type in the comment, tell me what your email is, and I'll send you my actions, all of my actions for free. And now let's look at the overall before and after. So here we got the before and then the after. And that concludes our tutorial. Once you're done, it's important to remember that now the editing process isn't over yet. This is the fun part where now you get into color grading your image. So let's take a look at the final image now when it's color graded and added all kinds of special effects that maybe I added with color balance, selective color, and curves. So keep that in mind after you do your dodge and burn process. Now, if you're curious and you're looking at it right now, you're like, este vato, I want to know how you do color grade. I want to see the other steps. Well, relax, relax. I have other tutorials. I have 3 other full edit tutorials. I have ones on skin tones. I have one on selective color, on how I color grade. So check out the rest of my YouTube channel if you enjoyed this video, if you're new to the channel. And I appreciate you guys checking out my tutorial, and I'll see you guys on the next video. Peace out.